The most important part of education is proper training in the nursery. Today, for part 3 of Plato, we're going to examine his views of school, of education, of love as well. If you look, generally speaking, the better exposure that kids have to loving individuals at a young age, generally can be shown will result in better life experiences. What we call learning is only a process of recollection or recollection. Plato believed that things we were born with, for instance, the theory of forms, they were innate. They naturally came with us. Except when we were born, it's a very traumatic experience, and we forget all that we had known in our previous experiences, meaning our previous life. Remember, Plato believes in reincarnation to a degree. And so he felt that what school was for was to remind you of things you once knew but have forgotten. And then when you have those sort of eye-opening light bulb moments, when the teacher says something that really resonates or you really get, it's only because you're remembering it on a deep level, or you're recollecting all of this learning that you had in your previous incarnation. So today we're going to watch a video. It's about 15 minutes long, from 60 Minutes. It's on the Baby Lab. And it's examining what children are born with. Are people born good? Are people born bad? Are people a tabula rasa or a blank slate?
It's a question people have asked for as long as there have been people. Are human beings inherently good? Are we born with a sense of morality? Or do we arrive blank slates waiting for the world to teach us right from wrong? Or could it be worse? Do we start out nasty, selfish devils who need our parents, teachers, and religions to whip us into shape? As we first reported last fall, the only way to know for sure is to ask a baby. But until recently, it's been hard to persuade them to open up and share their secrets. Enter the Baby Lab.
The story will continue in a moment.
This is the creature at the center of the greatest philosophical, moral, and religious debates about the nature of man, the human baby. They don't do much, can't talk, can't write, can't expound at length about their moral philosophies. But does that mean they don't have one? The philosopher Rousseau considered babies perfect idiots knowing nothing. And Yale psychologist Karen Wynn, director of the Infant Cognition Center here, the Baby Lab, says for most of its history, her field agreed.
Didn't we just think that these creatures at 3 months and even 6 months were basically just little blobs?
Oh, sure. I mean, if you look at them, they kind of look like little, cute little blobs, but they can't do all the things that an older child can. They can't even do the things that a dog or a pigeon or a rat can.
No pulling levers for treats or running mazes for these study subjects, but they can watch puppet shows.
Up goes the curtain.
And Wynn is part of a new wave of researchers who have discovered seemingly simple ways to probe what's really going on in those adorable little heads.
Up goes the curtain.
We watched as Wynn and her team asked a question that 20 years ago might have gotten her laughed out of her field. Does Wesley here, at the ripe old age of 5 months, know the difference between right and wrong? Wesley watches as the puppet in the center struggles to open up a box with a toy inside. The puppy in the yellow shirt comes over and lends a hand. Then the scene repeats itself, but this time the puppy in the blue shirt comes and slams the box shut. Nice behavior? Mean behavior. At least to our eyes. But is that how a 5-month-old sees it? And does he have a preference?
Wesley, do you remember these guys from the show?
To find out, a researcher who doesn't know which puppet was nice and which was mean offers Wesley a choice.
Who do you like?
He can't answer, but he can reach.
That one.
Wesley chose the good guy. And he wasn't alone.
That one.
More than 3/4 of the babies tested reached for the nice puppet.
That one.
Wynn tried it out on even younger babies, 3-month-olds, who can't control their arms enough to reach. But they can vote with their eyes, since research has shown that even very young babies look longer at things they like.
Which one do you like?
Daisy here looked at the mean puppet for 5 seconds, then switched to the nice one for 33.
Babies, even at 3 months, looked towards the nice character and looked hardly at all, much shorter times, towards the unhelpful character.
So basically, as young as 3 months old, we human beings show a preference for nice people over mean people.
Study after study after study, the results are always consistently babies feeling positively towards helpful individuals in the world and disapproving, disliking, maybe condemning individuals who are antisocial towards others.
It's astonishing.
Wynn and her team first published their findings about baby morality in the journal Nature in 2007. And they've continued to publish follow-up studies in other peer-reviewed journals ever since. For instance, on this experiment, they showed babies like James here a puppet behaving badly. Instead of rolling the ball back to the puppet in the middle, this green-shirted bunny keeps the other puppet's ball and runs away. Then James is shown a second show. This time, the bunny, who we just saw steal the ball, tries to open up the box to get the toy. Will James still prefer the puppet who helps out? Or will he now prefer the one who slams the box shut?
Who do you like?
He chose the one who slammed it shut, as did 81% of babies tested. The study's conclusion, babies seem to view the ball thief as deserving punishment.
So do you think that babies, therefore, are born with an innate sense of justice?
At a very elemental level, I think so.
We think we see here the foundations for morality. There's some way to do the punishment.
Paul Bloom is also a professor of psychology at Yale with his own lab. He's collaborated with Wynn on many of her baby studies, and he also happens to be her husband.
I feel we're making discoveries. I feel like we're discovering that what seems to be one way really isn't. What seems to be an ignorant and unknowing baby is actually a creature with this alarming sophistication, subtle knowledge.
And he says discovering this in babies who can't walk, talk, or even crawl yet suggests it has to come built in.
So remember B.F. Skinner, who said that we had to teach our children everything through conditioning. So does this just wipe him off the map?
What we're finding in the baby lab is that there's more to it than that there's a universal moral core that all humans share. The seeds of our understanding of justice, our understanding of right and wrong, are part of our biological nature.
Wait a minute. If babies are born with a basic sense of right and wrong, a universal moral core, where does all the evil in the world come from? Is that all learned? Well, maybe not. Take a look at this new series of discoveries in the Yale Baby Lab.
Would you like a snack?
In offering babies the seemingly small, innocuous choice, graham crackers or Cheerios, Wynn is probing something big, the origins of bias, the tendency to prefer others who are similar to ourselves.
Adults will like others who share even really absolutely trivial similarities with them.
So will Nate, who chose Cheerios over graham crackers,
Hi.
prefer this orange cat, who also likes Cheerios, over this gray cat who likes graham crackers instead?
Which one do you like?
Apparently so.
Remember these guys?
But if babies have positive feelings for the similar puppet, do they actually have negative feelings for the one who's different? To find out, Wynn showed babies the gray cat, the one who liked the opposite food, struggling to open up the box to get a toy. Will Gregory want to see the graham cracker eater treated well? Or does he want him treated badly?
Which one do you like? That one. Okay.
Gregory seemed to want the different puppet treated badly.
That is amazing. So he went with his bias in a way.
And so did Nate.
That one?
And 87% of the other babies tested. From this, Wynne concludes that infants prefer those who harm others who are unlike them.
What could be more arbitrary than whether you like graham crackers or Cheerios?
Nothing.
Nothing. But it matters. It matters to the young baby. We are predisposed to break the world up into different human groups based on the most subtle and seemingly irrelevant cues. And that, to some extent, is the dark side of morality.
We want the other to be punished.
In our studies, babies seem as if they do want the other to be punished.
We used to think that we are taught to hate. I think there was a song like that. This is suggesting that we're not taught to hate. We're born to hate.
I think that we are built at the, to at the drop of a hat, create us and them.
And that's why we're not that moral. We have an initial moral sense that is in some ways very impressive, and in some ways really depressing, that we see some of the worst biases in adults reflected in the minds and in the behaviors of young babies.
But Bloom says understanding our earliest instincts can help.
If you want to eradicate racism, for instance, you really are going to want to know to what extent are babies little bigots? To what extent is racism a natural part of humanity?
Sounds to me like the experiments show they are little bigots.
I think to some extent a bias to favor the self, where the self could be people who look like me, people who act like me, people with the same taste as me, is a very strong human bias. It is what one would expect from a creature like us who evolved through natural selection, but it has terrible consequences.
He says it makes sense that evolution would predispose us to be wary of the other for survival, and so we need society and parental nurturing to intervene. He showed us one last series of experiments being done in his lab, not with babies, but with older children of different ages.
Blue.
The kids get to decide how many tokens they'll get versus how many will go to another child they're told will come in later.
I love coins.
They're told the tokens can be traded in for prizes.
So you can say green, and if you say green, then you get this one, and the other girl doesn't get any. Or you can say blue, and if you say blue, then you get these two, and the other girl gets these two. So, green.
Green.
The youngest kids in the study will routinely choose to get fewer prizes for themselves
Green.
just to get more than the other kid.
I'll pick green.
In some cases, a lot more.
Youngest children in these studies are obsessed with social comparison.
So you get 7, she doesn't get any.
Yay!
They don't care about fairness. What they want is they want relatively more.
But a funny thing happens as kids get older.
Green.
Around 8, they start choosing the equal fair option more and more.
Green.
And by 9 or 10, we saw kids doing something really crazy,
Green.
deliberately giving the other kid more.
Green or blue?
Green.
They become generous.
8.
Chalk one up to society.
They've already been educated.
They've been educated, they've been enculturated, they have their heads stuffed full of the virtues that we might want to have their heads stuffed with. Culture and education.
So we can learn to temper some of those nasty tendencies we're wired for, the selfishness, the bias. But he says the instinct is still there.
When we have these findings with the kids who choose this and not this,
Who do you like?
the kids in the baby studies who favor the one who's similar to them, the same taste and everything, none of this goes away. I think as adults, we could always see these and kind of nod.
Yeah.
Not
It's still in us.
It's
We're
still in
fighting
us.
it.
And the truth is, when we're under pressure, when life is difficult, we regress to our younger selves, and all of this elaborate stuff we have on top disappears.
But of course, adversity can bring out the best in us too. Heroism, selfless sacrifice for strangers, all of which may have its roots right here.
Great kindness, great altruism, a magnificent sense of impartial justice have their seeds in the baby's mind. Both aspects of us, the good and the bad, are the product, I think, of biological evolution.
So it seems we're left where we all began, with a mix of altruism, selfishness, justice, bigotry, kindness. A lot more than any of us expected to discover in a blob.
Well, I end my conversation with you with far more respect for babies. Who knew?
So, the Baby Lab video. According to the video, what concepts might babies be already born with? In other words, before they can be taught, because the question is, can these little 2-year-olds, can they be taught, or are they learning, or are they born with some concepts? The video tries to show that maybe we have this sense of justice or revenge or wanting the other to be punished. Now, they turn it into almost a racist discussion whereby, are we born little bigots? But there is some truth to the fact the first time you walk into a room with people, you'll tend to go towards people who are similar to you, be it age, be it sex, be it color. And the idea of the other is something that perhaps we're born with. Question number 2, how might we have developed these concepts at such an early age? Well, some people would say natural selection, meaning that we're just naturally defensive against the other because, bears used to attack us when we were in the woods, 150 years ago. But also the idea of the theory of forms, innate, meaning that we're born with these concepts. Nobody ever told me what beautiful was or what was beautiful. But generally speaking, I, as well as most people, believe that the same things are beautiful. These are concepts, the theory of forms, that Plato said we were born with. And finally, what role does society seem to play with the older kids in the final study? I find this study interesting because when the kids are playing the game where they determine how many pieces that their partner has, the little kids seem to really enjoy taking all of the pieces away from their partners. The older kids always seem to share and try to be more thoughtful and generous. They didn't seem to be as excited. And it almost goes to show that maybe society is doing the curbing of our natural, greedy, comparative ways of looking at things. Most people think if I have more than you, I'm better than you, or whatever that is. And maybe that's something we're born with. Do not train children to learning by force and harshness, but direct them to it by what amuses their minds, so that you may be better able to discover with accuracy the peculiar bent of the genius of each. The peculiar bent of the genius of each meaning each person is a little bit different, and you need to find which buttons to push them and for them. And some kids are more creative, and some kids are more logical and analytical, and some kids are visual learners, and some kids really love history, and some kids really hate math. The idea is, if you think about your experiences in school, how accurate are they to what Plato felt in terms of learning by force? If you really examine it, just the concept of a test and failing the test being the fear mechanism to make you want to try isn't necessarily what Plato was talking about. I don't know that fear before the test is really amusing the mind and inspiring more learning. So Plato talked about teaching methods, and one of the things he talked about is learning by doing. This is something we'll talk about later in the year with John Dewey. He said, ultimately, we want to motivate people. He said, knowledge which is acquired under compulsion obtains no hold on the mind. This is a similar concept to the previous. If you're forced to learn something, you're not really going to hold on to it, and I think most kids would verify that. He thinks that we need to motivate people to learning. Now, in teaching, we have what's called an anticipatory set, or an initiation, where we try to hook you like you would hook a fish to get you interested so that you want to keep learning, not forcing you. What motivates better, the carrot that brings you or the stick that hits you from behind? So you could go through this, your years, 12 years of education. How many of your teachers have the majority of these things? I like the second one. He is like a torchbearer who leads a man lying in a dark cave out of the darkness into the bright light of the outside world. That, by definition, is the allegory of the cave. Being a constant guide. a pleasing personality. I think every teacher has a pleasing personality, right? The deeply committed to their profession. I personally obviously believe that teaching is the most noble of professions, and if you really want to try to change the world, you can do that by changing individuals, and teaching allows that to happen. Now we move on to love. Every theory of love, from Plato down, teaches that each individual loves in the other sex what he lacks in himself. So Plato said, if you fall in love, what's really happened is you have seen in someone else some quality that they have that you don't. So the example is, you're a really shy person. You're naturally going to be attracted to outgoing people. Now, maybe it's because you're hoping that subconsciously that their outgoing nature rubs off on you, or maybe you hold in high esteem that quality, that outgoing nature, because you don't have it because you're so shy. Other philosopher later in the year talks about we're always thinking about trying to achieve the perfect offspring, so we're always looking to have a positive of an attribute where we have a negative. Ultimately, the subconscious thought is that if you get close to this person, you're going to become a little bit like them. Now, it's interesting. If you really examine the people who you've gone out with or the people you've been attracted to, is this true? The idea of opposites attracting is this concept. So what is love? You've got physical love, lust, which obviously high schoolers and most people are aware of. Love for family, people understand that. Platonic love. Now, what's platonic love? Plato, obviously is the name of platonic love, is love from the neck up. So what is platonic love? It's that friendship love. It's basically love that's as strong. It has everything connected between people, but it doesn't involve sex. And the question is platonic love possible? You see a lot of times a guy and a girl who become best of friends. And the question is, if it's not a relationship whereby they're giving relationship advice to each other, then you would call this platonic love. Well, the question is, historically, how many times does one of those two people actually want more than just a friendship, and their platonic love is more of the physical love lust? But I don't know, I've had experiences, some of the best experiences, the best love that I've had is with people who were friends, and sex did not enter the picture. And then finally, love for everyone. This is very foreign to some people who basically have a very small circle of people they love, probably just including their family and friends. But some others say love for everyone, and that's a different sort of concept that we'll talk about in Eastern philosophy. We'll leave it for till then. So we're going to have a number of different questions that would be good for discussion. Do we really love the other person, or do we need to feel loved by someone else? Is it them or us? This is an odd thing, and you've seen the people who break up and have to get back together. Is there something about needing someone else to want us, to make us feel valued? Is it really that person, or is it us? Is it really just a security blanket to have someone else who loves us? Second question, is it the catch or the chase? Do we want the other person, or do we just want to win them over? I mean, I've seen, for years of having to play Dr. Philcock's marriage counselor to students, that a lot of times after that little honeymoon period or after the catch, things change. And maybe there's a lot more self-esteem, the first two both deal with this, in the love component. Maybe it's not the other person, maybe it's about proving something to yourself by how others respond to you. When or why does love and sexual attraction become the L word? That L word would be love. The idea is, I don't know, I personally have not logically, rationally thought to myself, I like how they look and their qualities and their attributes. I should fall in love with them. But rather, for me, love sort of happens usually during a dream. Maybe somebody I know, and maybe I've known for a while. All of a sudden in a dream one day, I begin thinking of them differently. And it's not some weird dream, sexual dream, but just something happens within you that sort of switches it. And we'll talk about the kids' experiences on that. Do you love your friends, or do they just fill a role in your life? And I had a kid say once, I wrote a journal. I listen to all of their stories that I don't care about, and then they listen to all of mine. It's interesting when we surround ourselves with friends who we claim we love. Is it really just out of convenience? I had a kid, after I did this discussion one year, write that they couldn't wait to graduate because their friend group, which was like 4 or 5 girls, she just couldn't stand them anymore. But they were convenient to have around, and she didn't want to change. So even though they acted and they did this sort of sideways, cheek kisses and the love you all day long, she really didn't like him anymore. And then a couple of days later, another one of her friends wrote the exact same thing, not aware that she had, where apparently the whole friend group really wasn't based on any love, it was based more on convenience. People who always need to be in a relationship, what is that about? I referenced it earlier, but I'm sure some of you are this or know this. There's that comfort, and maybe just not wanting to be alone. But if you dig a little deeper, what is that? Is that self-esteem? Is it something else? Possessive love and jealousy, the brightness in the passion of love will burn ultimately through, oftentimes, and jealousy can rip that love apart. If you try to hold on to sand too tight in your hands, it will slip through your fingers. Where does the love and the jealousy come from? Something happens where the love is so strong and then you're fearful you're going to lose the love, and then a control thing. Does it come back to self-esteem again? Finally, and this is one that resonates with some people, is the other, especially those who just got broken up with, is the other person no more than an external stimulus that awakens love that's already inside of you? And could a lot of people switch that love on inside of you? In other words, you feel love inside of you and you feel love towards another person. And when that person breaks up with you, you now feel sad because love is gone. But the question is, where was the love? Is that other person just sort of a key to a lock that's inside of you, that lock being the love that you obviously have the capacity to have for others? And could other people open that lock? And so the concept is maybe when we looking for happiness, it comes from inside, not outside. This looks at it in the same way in terms of love. And finally, the idea of the starvation model. This is a one that unfortunately comes true a lot. If somebody who hasn't had something in a long time, if you've been starving, when you finally have a sandwich or food, you're going to be so appreciative that you have it, and you're going to hold on to it tight. Well, unfortunately, in relationship situations, if for the longest time you've been starving, quote unquote, and seen all of your friends in happy situations, and you don't, well, when you eventually get that, are you going to go to a very, very high after being in a low for so long? Most likely, because you've been starving. The question is, then does that starvation turn into holding on too tight and that possessive love and jealousy, and we lose what we got because we loved it so much, we held it too tight?